Today, we're going to take a look at The Falcon and Winter Soldier and how it explores PTSD. So, we catch up with Bucky Barnes, aka the Winter Soldier, and what the filmmakers have decided to do here, which I think is fantastic, is they've given a deeply emotional and impactful journey for the Winter Soldier to go through. So, what is PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder? Well, it is a terrible affliction which doesn't just affect veterans of wars and battles, it can affect literally anyone who goes through a physical or emotional trauma in their lives. The effects of PTSD can last from weeks up to decades depending on the person, and it is also an incredibly important topic to explore through our stories, as so many people have this issue in their lives. Enter Bucky Barnes, or the Winter Soldier. A guy trapped in his own brain for 90 years, mercilessly killing people when he didn't want to. The trauma of that is now coming back to haunt him, is finally catching up to him, and we meet him at a moment in his life where he is having to come to terms with everything that his body did, that he was witness to during his time as the Winter Soldier.
Hail Hydra.
So let's take a look at how the filmmakers have told us that the Winter Soldier, Bucky Barnes, currently has PTSD without ever saying he has PTSD. So from 1628 all the way to 1811, we are witness to Bucky Barnes' dream world, where he remembers the assassination of one of his targets, as well as him killing a bystander who had seen his face.
I didn't see anything. I didn't see anything.
This is very accurate to what a lot of people who are going through PTSD say that their trauma feels like. Quite often, there are many triggers for those events, from loud bangs to smells, textures, tones, colors, can all trigger certain memories without any control. As soon as we move after that, we realize that Bucky is sleeping on the floor, almost like he doesn't feel like he needs any sense of comfort. Now, agreed, he's been through some pretty rough times in his life, but for those of us who don't know that, this is a great way of showing us that he really doesn't care for any creature comforts. He's certainly not going out and buying silk cotton sheets.
So, Mr. Barnes, are you still having nightmares?
At 1820, we now meet Mr. Barnes in the psychologist's office. This frame is actually incredibly powerful in many ways. First of all, he is completely centered framed, but he's very small in the frame. In fact, we can fit exactly 10 Bucky Barnes into this frame. Just this frame alone is incredibly powerful in letting us know his current mental state. He's not confident at all. Next, let's take a look at what's around him. If you see, he's actually sat in front of what would be quite a serene picture. But if we take a closer look at that picture, we realize that the picture is cut almost completely in half by a shard of light, as if half of his brain is in complete darkness and the other half is in the light. He's not quite all there yet.
Are you still having nightmares?
No.
At 1824, we get treated to a really unusual camera angle. We've gone from being very wide to incredibly close, almost an extreme close-up on his eye. But we're not just on eye level. the filmmakers have gone and put the camera up very, very high. This is a very strange angle, and it also reflects that his current mental state is not stable. We don't get a clear view of his entire face. In fact, only his eyeball is actually in focus. It's important to note that most films and TV series, when going from a wide shot and trying to get closer to a character, will go through a medium shot before going to a close-up. So by smashing from a wide shot to an extreme close-up on his face, we're jarringly brought into his space. It's almost as if the filmmakers are trying to make us feel as uncomfortable as he does.
We've been doing this long enough that I can tell when you're lying.
At 1831, the very next shot, with 3 shots in to this scene, speaks so much about Bucky Barnes' mind state. This is a really unusual creative choice. Generally, when looking at one character's face, when we cut to the other side, we look at the other character's face to see how they are communicating with the first character. But in this case, that's not the case. The psychologist is much bigger in frame than Bucky Barnes was in his initial shot. This lets us know also that maybe she is more in power in this particular situation.
With your history, the government needs to know that you're not gonna...
At 18 minutes and 53 seconds, we break from the to and fro between the psychologist and Bucky Barnes. We're treated to the first shot where we truly see the full head of the psychologist. But what's different between this shot and Bucky Barnes' initial shot? Again, she takes up so much more of the frame. This is very important because this lets us know that the psychologist is in control, but also she is not his adversary. Generally, when putting 2 characters against one another in some type of discussion, filmmakers will put them on either side of the frame. Left-hand side generally is for protagonists, and right-hand side is for the antagonist.
It's a condition of your pardon. It's a condition of your pardon.
But in this case, both characters are in the middle of the frame. They both want the same thing: for Bucky to have mental health, to be normal Bucky without the trauma. But there's more to this frame than just the size of the character. In fact, we can only really fit 3 psychologists into this frame compared to Bucky's 10. But let's look at the objects around her. She doesn't have a painting behind her. Some of you might be wondering, well, why is that even relevant? Think about it. When a psychologist brings you into their office, they want you to relax. Therefore, they'll probably have the calming paintings and artwork behind them and not behind you where you can't even look at them. So why have the filmmakers done something which isn't necessarily correct? Well, I think what they've done is they've chosen to actually convey the characters rather than a real psychologist's office. I mean, let's face it, this is Marvel, so super soldiers and wizards and magic and exploding planets.
Avengers!
Now, Bucky Barnes has just been telling us how he's been trying to make amends, and now we get the first glimpse at a list.
And you're part of my efforts to make amends.
So you did it all right, but it didn't help with the nightmares.
But as we can see from that list, none of the names seem to be crossed off, and he's only putting a line through the bottom name. Now, psychologically, this lets us know that this was probably the easiest of his tasks, or the least important.
You don't have 10 phone numbers on this thing. No.
We get another manifestation of Bucky Barnes' weakness. We're treated to what would be seen as a close-up, but Bucky's head is put in the bottom half of the screen. And again, we can fit 10 Bucky heads in the frame. As you can see by now, the filmmakers are using lots and lots of tools to try and let us know just how deep this trauma is, but they're not done yet.
And other than that, I just went from one fight to another for 90 years.
The first time in which Bucky Barnes actually opens up to the psychologist about his trauma is the first time we are treated to music in this scene. And that's really, really important. It lets us know that he is redeemable. There is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Now that you've stopped fighting, what do you want?
Peace.
Oh, the tragedy of the Winter Soldier. He's actually probably one of the more sympathetic characters in the show, even though he's probably committed more murder than pretty much all of the others. Yet, he is still a beloved character because he is ultimately redeemable.
Well, if that's not the most adorably old-fashioned thing anyone's ever done.
Now, later in the first episode, we see Bucky Barnes on a first date with a potential suitor who could be pretty perfect for him. Unfortunately, however, as I said previously, PTSD sufferers almost always have some sort of trigger. And unfortunately, this lady lands on a trigger.
I think it's really sweet you're spending time with Yori. It's been hard for him since his son died.
I think not knowing how it happened is the hardest part for him.
She doesn't just land on it, she keeps hitting that trigger over and over and over again.
You know how we call a guy whose wife died a widower? Or if your parents die, you're an orphan. No, there's no word for someone whose kids die. Because it's like the worst thing that can happen.
Excuse me.
And at that moment, he pushes her away. His guilt and trauma take over. Many people who suffer from PTSD state how difficult it is to have interpersonal relationships due to these triggers in their life. And it isn't until they can start to get on top of these triggers, start to understand and control those emotional triggers, that they're able to start forming deeper bonds with other people.
How was the date?
Finally, one of the strongest elements that lets us know about the Winter Soldier, Bucky Barnes' journey that's going to be over this series, is when we get to see the list again. This list lets us know just how much trauma Bucky Barnes has to sift through, has to get through to find himself again. And at the very top of this list, towards the end of the first episode, letting us know that this is not just the most important, but the most difficult, is the innocent man's father, Nakashima. This moment to me sent shivers down my spine, as it let me know that the filmmakers are utterly aware about the type of journey they need to send the Winter Soldier on to find himself again.